if your goal is to be 65 and sitting on a beach for the rest of your life doing nothing, the social science tends to say that's not very good for you. You actually should be involved in your community and get involved and still have a side job and all the rest of that. But if we really believe that we can't raise the retirement age and we're never going to change that, we will go bankrupt.
All right, guys, right out of the gate, we've got Ben Shapiro saying if you don't work until you drop, the country goes bankrupt. Retire at 65? Not if Shapiro can't help it. Apparently, you've got to keep grinding until you're 110. But let's hit pause because the real scam isn't Social Security. It's what they don't want you looking at. But lucky for us, I'm here to point out the anomaly. Let's break it down.
You know, that super sexy debate over what contributes more to our national debt came up during my appearance on CNN last night. Ben Shapiro thinks we need to raise the retirement age to 110 years old because Social Security, of course, is bankrupting the country. But I disagreed. I actually blamed a different reason for our growing US debt. I focused on military interventions, endless foreign aid, and involvement in conflicts abroad that, you know, we spend a lot of money on and don't have pay-fors baked into. So I'll make my case a little better after we hear more from Ben Shapiro. Take a look.
So here's the setup. Ben's pushing raise the retirement age as the big fix and is blaming endless wars and foreign aid. And Cenk, he's promising there's an easy solution. This isn't just a policy debate, it's a battle over who gets blamed for America's debt. Let's get into it.
All the talk about cutting at the margins, you know, whatever Doge is doing, that's not going to touch the real driver of the systemic debt in the United States. Women are living to 85 if you make it to 65. Men are living to 83 if you make it to 65. That's 20 years on the public dime.
When you're talking about, hold on, when you're talking about the government paying, you're talking about Social Security,
Yes.
which is people's money.
Well, it is. Well, it is not the money you paid in.
It's the system that they pay into.
Well, no,
you're
you're
calling.
Paycheck stub.
Yes, but believe me, I pay a lot.
I know I pay into Social Security. I don't know about you.
I promise you, the amount that people are taking out is not the amount that is going in, which is why we are going bankrupt.
Okay. So I've been advised by Ben to look at a chart of our national debt. And I'm gonna do that in a minute. But before I do, Cenk, what are your thoughts on what Ben Shapiro had to say? People are living a little longer, right? And it is true that the amount of revenue that goes into the Social Security Trust isn't enough to cover the benefits, right? We do borrow a little bit every year as a result of that. Now there's a fix to it, but what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so there's a lot of misdirection here, guys. I'll talk about the retirement age after we fix the bare minimum fixes that are super easy, actually. Okay, so number one, they say, oh, look, we're raising the retirement age, not because we want to take more of your money and make sure that you can't take that money out and give it, we want to give it to rich people in tax cuts and corporations and subsidies and foreign governments. No, it's because we want you to have time to get involved in the community. That's not why. That's hilarious, okay? You can get involved in the community any way you like and bless your heart, and I heard that discussion you guys had and I encourage it, right? But that has nothing to do with what age we should set, because if they move it from, let's say, 65 to, make up a number, 69, right? So those are 4 years you would not get benefits. That is stealing from you every single year, a significant amount of money. It has nothing to do with what you're gonna do at the community center. And then when he says going bankrupt, wait, what does he mean? Does he mean Social Security going bankrupt or the budget itself, the entire country going bankrupt? Because those are two separate issues. As we're about to tell you, fixing Social Security is actually very simple.
Like shockingly easy.
Yes, and that's not going bankrupt at all if we do that one easy fix.
On the surface, Shapiro makes it sound logical. People live longer, more years of benefits, money runs out. But Cenk nails them. Raising the retirement age is just a polite way of saying we're stealing $100,000 from you. They frame it like community engagement, but it's just the deft with better PR.
And then in terms of the country, that's a larger conversation and one I'm thrilled to have. And we should have all those conversations before we get to moving the retirement age.
Okay, so I responded to what Shapiro said there. So I want to go to that moment and then we'll break it down further.
I just totally reject what you just said about how we're going bankrupt due to Social Security. Really, you don't think like the trillions of dollars we've spent on wars in the Middle East might have something to do with that?
It is not even
our
remotely
national
a percentage
debt.
what we spend on Social
Our national
Security.
debt shot up significantly after 9/11, after we started invading countries in the Middle East.
You should look at a chart.
Now
of
we're at
national debt.
30.
Social Security is our problem.
So it's kind of hard
Not
to
the
hear
wars.
because we're talking over each other, but he said at the very end, you should look at a chart of our national debt. And I took his advice, so let's take a look at a chart of the national debt and see where it's shot up. Oh wow, would you look at that? Using data from the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis, this chart shows how US spending, or I should say the debt, really shot up exponentially beginning in the early 2000s. Gee, I wonder what happened then. So the last time the United States, by the way, had a budget surplus, not a deficit, not a debt, budget surplus, was when President Bill Clinton was leaving office in 2000 and George W. Bush was coming in. So obviously Social Security wasn't bankrupting the country. We weren't dealing with debt at that point, and Social Security was already, a well-established, program. So what changed in the early 2000s? What could it have been? Well, here's Senator Bernie Sanders. This is a speech he gave on the Senate floor in 2012, basically taking us down a trip, or taking us on a trip down memory lane. Take a look.
Before we get to Bernie, I just want to explain the hidden breakdown. Anna steps in and tries to redirect. What about wars in the Middle East, she says. And here's where it gets messy. She's not wrong about debt spiking post 9/11, but notice the trick. They pit Social Security versus military spending instead of admitting both parties are addicted to spending with no pay-fors. That's the hidden layer. Neither side wants to stop raiding the piggy bank. Now let's hear from Bernie.
President Bush assumed office, and within a few years, we were fighting not just one war in Afghanistan, but another war in Iraq. Many of the deficit hawks today, the people who tell us, oh, gee, we've got to cut Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid and nutrition and education. We got to cut. When asked to pay for those wars, they had nothing to say. Nobody knows exactly how much these two wars will end up costing, but the guess is that by the time we take care of the last veteran 70 years from now, those wars may run up over $3 trillion, and we did not pay for them to the tune of 1 penny.
So understand what Senator Sanders is saying there. He's saying, look, we just keep engaging in conflict abroad, starting wars in the Middle East. There are no pay-fors. We are literally borrowing money to do this. And that is why when you look at a chart of our national debt, you will notice our national debt skyrockets beginning in the early 2000s. This is not rocket science, okay? It really isn't. And so I'm about to get to Scott Jennings in just a moment because, he heard me talk about invasions in the Middle East and it got his dander up about Israel. So we'll get to that in a minute. But Cenk, any thoughts?
Yeah, so I want you guys to understand how much they're thinking of robbing from you. So average payments for the average American from Social Security every year is about $24,000. So if they move the retirement age by 4 years, that means they're going to literally take $100,000 that every American would have been paid if they retired at 65, and they're going to take it from you and make sure the government has it. Now, if the government spent it well, that would be one thing, right? But what does the government spend it on? Well, Anna's right. So how much did the global war on terrorism cost, for example? $8 trillion.
Good old Cenk, Chubby Cenk, drops the 100K bombshell. 4 lost years of retirement equals 6 figures gone. And what does government do with it? Blow trillions on the war on terror. And now endless Ukraine and Israel packages. The cultural move here is classic. Shame regular Americans for wanting their own money back, while celebrating foreign aid as moral leadership.
So one of the tricks that Ben Shapiro is doing in that appearance is, well, Social Security is a huge part of the budget. Yes, but a huge percentage of that has already been covered by the amount we put in through our checks throughout our entire lives. So now we need a little bit extra on top because it's not quite covering it, but that little bit extra on top is the issue, not the entire Social Security budget.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Yes.
So that's why when you look at that little extra on top versus the $8 trillion on the global war on terror, let alone the Department of Defense, which is now up to $1 trillion a year, those dwarf Social Security as a concern. But on TV, you get all this pyrotechnics to try to trick you into thinking it's your fault and you should retire later instead of us starting endless wars.
And this type of conversation is so frustrating to have in the format that we were having it in, because it's a quick segment on CNN. We got to go to break. There's like 5 people on the panel, 6 if you want to include the host, Abby Phillip. And so it's so easy to trick people in the way that Ben Shapiro can trick people, right? And so that's why I'm having this conversation now, because I want people to understand what we're talking about and what that little trick and conflation is from Ben Shapiro and people, conservatives like him, who want to do away with Social Security entirely. So what also stood out to me was Scott Jennings immediately jumps in, because when it comes to our taxpayer dollars, obviously, Israel is entitled to it, and how dare you bring up the Middle East? So let's take a look at how that exchange went down.
Honestly, these foreign conflicts have a lot more to do with our national debt as
hell they
opposed
do
to
by the
us
numbers. That
paying
is
up
just
to
untrue.
our Social
You
Security
think
system.
Israel is a bigger portion of our budget than Social Security, Medicare,
I think we
Medicaid?
spend way too much money on
just asking you as a
military
mathematical
aid for
numbers
foreign
thing.
countries.
You think
Absolutely.
Israel is more
Do
than
you
Social
think
Security?
that Social Security is more of an issue compared to how much money we just shell out for conflicts abroad?
As a matter of expenditures and math,
that
yes.
both entitlements and defense are a big issue.
All right, guys, here's the red pill moment. Scott Jennings jumps in outraged that Anna even mentioned Israel. Boom, the mask slips. Suddenly it's not about debt, not about seniors. It's about making sure U.S. taxpayer cash keeps flowing overseas. The Matrix trick is complete. Convince you grandma's Social Security check is bankrupting America while ignoring the trillions funneled abroad.
Okay. So I would prefer not to fund a genocide. So there's the moral issue with that, obviously. But I also have a problem with providing military aid to a country that had an economic surplus as recently as 2021. How do you justify that?
Yeah, I want to get into more detail there. So another misdirection here. So Scott Jennings is trying to say like, oh, that $3.8 billion we give Israel every year is very small compared to the slice of the budget that's Social Security. Again, the overwhelming majority of the Social Security budget has already been paid for by you through all the taxes you paid. So that's misleading, number one. Number two, that's not the only thing with Israel. We also gave them $20 billion in the middle of the genocide. Overall, in inflation-adjusted numbers, we've now given them $310 billion. That's point number one. Point number two is we had no business in Iraq. They did not attack us on 9/11. In fact, they were an enemy of al-Qaeda. But at the time, Israel and the neocons said it was Israel's #1 enemy, and that for our security and safety, we had to attack their enemy, who was actually against al-Qaeda and killing al-Qaeda at the time, okay? Right. So now they say we have to attack Iran, and we did attack Iran, and they say we have to attack we have to do all the entire global war on terror. Okay, wait, that's another $8 trillion on top of the $300 billion. And now, as I said, the Department of Defense has gone from about $800 billion in recent years to now close to $1 trillion a year. Now, it's not just Israel, it's also the defense contractors that benefit from that. But now you see how, quote unquote, defense of quote unquote America is, when in reality it's about offense for Israel, has cost us literally trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars.
With no pay force.
Right, while they're trying to distract you with, oh, it's just $4 billion a year, right? That's the tip of the iceberg. They're trying desperately to make sure you don't see the iceberg. Not only because of the size of the iceberg, but also because they're trying to get you to work more years of your life to pay for those wars for Israel.
Think about how disgusting this argument is. Like, the more I think about it, the more enraged I feel, right? Because what they're effectively communicating here is our problem here in the United States is all these elderly people collecting their entire entitlement benefits, okay? Not the fact that we've been shelling out trillions of dollars for global wars, in many cases on behalf of Israel, with no pay-fors. That is so sick. It's so sick that like it's ingrained in the minds of these pundits on the right and some on the left as well, meaning the Democrats in positions of power.
Yeah, guys, I usually do not side or agree with Anna and Cenk on too many topics, but this one, I definitely agree with them. And here's the closer. Chubby Cenk and Anna Kasparian act shocked at the trick, but don't forget, they've played the same game when it benefits their side. This isn't left versus right, it's insider versus the rest of us. The real question, how many more years do you have to work to fund their wars, their bailouts, their aid packages? That's the system exposed. If you're tired of the scam, hit like, drop a comment, and share this with someone still plugged into the mainstream narrative. Time to unplug America, one clip at a time.